Right, so I'm going to start by telling you a story. So this is John, and he is a regular average software engineer. He has a bachelor's degree in computer science and has been working for 5 years. He works for Megacorp, which is a global conglomerate doing all sorts of things, some of them suspicious. He is working on Awesome, which is a team within Megacorp which is just trying to solve everything for everyone, whatever it is. So as part of his job, working on Awesome, he is working on the authentication system for it. And he is under a lot of pressure because they're going to launch in a month, and everything has to be working. And the system must be tested, and so on. So as part of his job, he throws together this quick and easy login function. And probably as a side note, it has a pretty big vulnerability, but I'll get to that later. So all goes well, and they launch, and get very much fanfare. They get featured in Wired, TechCrunch, front page of Hacker News, front page on Product Hunt, and so on. And within just a couple of weeks, they're valued at over $1 billion. And then a couple of months later, disaster strikes. So BBC is the first to break the story of a massive data dump of Megacorp's user information hitting the web, and others pick up on it, and it goes all around. In the aftermath, the Megacorp is hit with a massive fine by the European Union because of GDPR regulations. And their CEO is forced to resign amidst insider trading probes. So why did I start with this? The reason I'm telling you this is because this is a very, very dramatic and excessive version of what has been happening in multiple breaches lately. Some developer somewhere introduced a vulnerability into some code, which was then used to exploit the system and gain access to sensitive information. And just as a note, in the previous headline, most of the headlines were real for Equifax, and I just added Equifax to Megacorp, except for the GDPR one, but that's going to be true in a couple of months. So this is noticeably a growing trend in the tech industry. We see these things almost every day. And they become ever more prevalent. And according to Gemalto, over 1.9 billion records were leaked in the first half of 2017. And to compare, 1.4 billion were leaked in the entire year of 2016. So protecting against attacks is a massive effort, which, well, clearly, Megacorp didn't execute correctly. So we'll ask, did this have to happen? What could we possibly have done about this? And then to answer this, we can look at how Megacorp was breached. So the hackers got into the system by just starting at Awesome through the flaws in the authentication and escalated their privileges. That's how they got into the network. And then they sat there for 2 months, patiently waiting, evading all the firewalls, antivirus systems, even the blue team, which is a team within Megacorp specifically tasked with defending against these attacks. Ultimately, they managed to exfiltrate an unknown amount of data. They don't really know. And some of it ended up online. But why is this important? Because this security is not exactly lacking. They had all the protocols in place. They had all the expensive hardware, all the solutions, all the security professionals, and so they were supposed to take care of their data. But the thing is, the attacker was incredibly persistent. He just sat there in wait for 2 months and just patiently inching forward through the system until he got what he wanted. And a lot of these solutions will also just they will usually solve a small part of your security, but they will try to convince you that they solve every part of your security. And this leads to what I'm here to talk about today. What if all developers, IT technicians, etc., became hackers? What if they were capable of testing their code against exactly this type of thing? And then, therefore, we could distribute the load of defending against attacks across them. Because the problem is that a hacker, well, as a defender, you only need to find, you need to protect against all the holes, but the attacker only needs to find one. So if we go back and revisit the story of John, but this time, we're going to upgrade him to version 2.0 with the hacker mindset. Now, having the mindset of a hacker, John is adept at finding flaws in code. He analyzes what could go wrong in code as he is writing it. So as a result, he now knows how to write authentication systems securely and knows of the common flaws in authentication systems. So let's see how things go differently this time. Again, he is working for the same company, same product, and he writes this code again. But this time, he notices an issue. So, yeah. And you can imagine the sound effect. But and so the cookie here is unverified. So if you, an attacker, if you can guess some user's ID, or he knows it somehow, then he just edits the cookie and he's logged in as that user. So John takes a pause, researches a bit, finds solutions to this problem, and resolves it to this code, which is protected against the attack. And in the resulting launch, the attackers try again. But this time, they can't even get through the first part of the system, which makes them very sad. So, and the launch goes well. They value that way too much money for their own good. And John becomes very rich as a result. So, what was the difference here? Was it that John was wearing a hat? No, but this time he was capable of hacking his own code as he wrote it. And this brings me to the main point, which is a developer today should be able to analyze his own code for security vulnerabilities. If this was the case, then most of the really simple vulnerabilities would more or less be gone, and the complicated ones would at least be very diminished. Also, John didn't have to become an awesome hacker. He didn't have to know how to hack into a government agency. He just had to know how to critically think about his own code. Because John is in a much better position than any attacker. He has a lot more information available to him. He knows all the systems. He knows what's there. So he can get away with being a fairly basic hacker. He just has to really think about what could happen if something is breached. So how is it possible to learn this? The best way to learn is usually through practice, but hacking is illegal. So yeah, you could go read a book You could go watch some videos on YouTube, which is that's fun and all, but it's not as fun as actually trying it out yourself. So many enthusiasts set up hacking competitions, which are called CTFs, or Capture the Flag competitions. And Capture the Flag competitions work by setting up challenges where you're authorized to break into them, and you want to somehow trick the program into giving you a flag, which is kind of secret data, like the data that you'll see in breaches and so on. And then these flags will give you points towards the competition. And at the end, the one with the most points is considered the winner. And these competitions are all over the place. And they range in difficulty and quality. I personally really like Pico CTF, which is made by Carnegie Mellon, and they intended for beginners. That's personally how I really got started. CTF Time is a very, very good source of these things, and the security CTF subreddit is also very useful. Well, you don't have to compete, but it's a great place to, you don't have to compete seriously. You can just take part and learn and get first-hand experience in security testing. And then these skills can be used in defense to analyze your own code against attacks. So me and my friends, we decided at one point that we wanted to try our hand at hosting a CTF. And we called it ICTF for Iceland. And we aimed for training beginners. And we collaborated with Reykjavik University and Syndis and hosted a 2-week-long CTF in 2015, and then again in 2016. We got off to a very, very good start. In 2015, we received over 500 contestants, and and almost 400 teams, and over 50 teams were from Iceland. And then in 2016, we did it again. And, well, as you can see, we got over 3,000 contestants and over 1,600 teams, along with over 300 contestants and 125 teams from Iceland, which was great. So there really is an interest in this. And after hosting this, we got a couple of emails from people saying, well, thanking us because they used the skills that they learned from ICTF to prevent a possible catastrophe at their workplace. And then there's also the point of what can be done in the future, because this is more of an after-the-fact solution. But in universities, there is very little focus on cybersecurity training. At least in computer science curriculums here, there is almost no focus on security training. But as I've probably shown to you, then being able to write secure code should be as basic to people as, well, or as fundamental as algorithms. So one way that you could do this is a very, very simplified view of security vulnerabilities is an assumption, which turns out to be wrong. So the Meltdown vulnerability, which was in the news lately, the problem there was that they assumed that a program couldn't really read or check if something was contained in the CPU cache. And then, as it turned out, they were completely wrong. So what you could do there is, in a lot of courses, you could just require people to check exactly what your assumptions are and how you can verify them. And then the hacker mindset can also extend to anyone. It doesn't just have to be developers. You can think about what if you had to hack yourself? How would you do it? For example, when you're choosing a password, how difficult would it be for someone to guess this password? If a random person were to get a hold of my password, could they use it to get into something else? How secure are your devices in your home? Did you change all the passwords, as probably you heard from Mnemonic talk about earlier, that your IoT devices are not exactly secure. Question your emails. Can you be sure that they were sent by whoever they were sent from? And are your devices accessible to the internet, etc.? There's tons of ways that can be used to hack you, and you just need to be mindful of them. So, as a last point, we need to learn to hack ourselves before the hackers do. And yeah, if there are any questions, you can come down to the Syndis booth later on. Thank you.